Welcome to our second episode, Wamtombe and Wazlovu, Wazilekai, where we discuss issues that pertain Africans and Black people in general. Today we are here to discuss the African herbs. I had an opportunity to grow up in an African home. I had an opportunity to grow up in an African community. I had an opportunity to mingle with African brothers as I grew up. As I said, I grew up in an African home where we could be given African herbs for different sicknesses. Not because my parents were healers or they were sangomas, but my parents were just people in general who knew these African herbs that could assist when someone is not feeling well. My parents knew these African herbs. So as they knew these African herbs, so we grew up under them, looking after us as parents. And when we develop any sickness, they give us these African herbs. My parents knew how to treat syphilis with an African herb. My parents knew how to treat gonorrhea with an African herb. My parents knew how to treat a running stomach with an African herb. My parents knew how to treat headache with an African herb. So I grew up with them knowing all these things, that whenever we are sick in a home, this is an herb that we can use to treat this sickness. As I grew up, I never knew that when I'm coughing, I must go and look for a modern medicine from a chemistry or a hospital. As I grew up, I knew the trees or leaves from trees that I could boil and drink, then I'm healed. So these are African herbs that we have disregarded them, and these are African herbs that most of us today we regard them as evil. Because anything that is has to do with Africans or has to do with African people is regarded as evil. Because all the herbs that African people do use, they are associated with people who are healers and people who are sangomas. Because these people who are healers and people who are sangomas, they are regarded as evil. So anything that is associated with them, it is evil. But as I said before, my parents were not healers. My parents were not sangomas. My people were just people in general in a community. But they knew these things that could help in a family. As I said, I grew up under them, and I grew up under these African herbs. I remember one time I fell from a tree, and I had a scar at the back. Even now, there's a scar here that you can look. The hair is not growing there. I fell from a tree when I was very young. But my parents, because they knew African herb could heal wounds, so they nursed me in a home. I did not go to any hospital. They nursed me in a home until that wound was completely healed. Because they knew these African herbs, and they knew these African herbs that could assist. I grew up in a home. Even today, I know some of these herbs through my parents, that if I'm coughing, I can go and take this tree and mix with these leaves, and then I drink, I'll be healed. Even if my stomach is pain, I know a herb that I can go into the bush and look for these roots and put them in water and I drink, I'm healed. Even if today, even if we have syphilis, I know an African herb that can cure those things. Even if we have gonorrhea, I know an African herb that can cure gonorrhea. These herbs, we could learn them from our families who were knowing all these herbs. Some of us will testify today that women were delivering in their homes. There were old women who could assist them in taking care of the delivery process until the woman is completely delivered. These women will assist in the delivery process. They will assist after the delivery process. They will assist in the cutting of the umbilical cords. They will assist in everything that is pertaining to a delivery of a woman. Some of you, you know one or two in your family or any other families in your community, those who were delivered behind doors in a kitchen or a kitchen hut where you could be there and then there's time for delivery and you deliver at the back of the door through the assistance of these African women. So these women, they could deliver. After delivery, they could be looked after through Africa, given African herbs by these African old ladies, these African magogos who could look after them after they have delivered. The child is given African herbs, it grows well, and it grows well, he or she grows well until she's seen that she can now be in the care of your mother or in the care of your mother, and then the old woman will leave after they've seen that a job has been done. It is in our African being that we can do our things for ourselves. These African herbs, they could be today they are mixed with modern technology to still produce these medicines or tablets that we buy from the chemistry or anyhow. They still go to these African herbs or African roots or African leaves. Now there's COVID. As there is COVID, we see in the shops they sell eucalyptus leaves, that if you drink this tea, eucalyptus tree, you get healed. These eucalyptus trees are the trees that are from an African perspective. If you go to the bush, you get an eucalyptus leaves and you can put them in water, put them in water and steam with them. Put eucalyptus leaves and put them in water, you steam yourself, you get better. So these are the African herbs that we're talking about. We are not talking about African herbs that for practicing witchcraft or any other thing, but we speak about African herbs that were used by our parents to heal in a community. They were used by our parents to keep the home safe. They were used by our parents to protect us in every way. So we cannot say today the African herbs, we can do away with them, because they still exist and they still help us. We know in an African perspective, a lot of African countries, they don't have proper hospitals. A lot of African countries, the healthcare system is poor. There are places in Africa where there's no hospital. There are places in Africa where hospitals are 5 kilometers from each other. So the help is still needed in Africa. But without that help from the hospitals, what can we do? We still go to our old route and still go back to where we began and continue to practice what we could practice. Recently, when COVID started, uh, there were news all over that a herb has been discovered in Africa to cure COVID-19. But because it was from Africa, it was regarded, no, it cannot be used. It must be tested and be found and see if it is proper. All those things that come up with foreign countries, that anything that is from Africa is not proper. Because them, when they colonized Africa, what they were there in Africa is to milk the Africans from their resources, to milk the Africans from whatever they have, because Africa is rich in itself. They came here to milk us, to take the resources, all the resources, and go back with them. And when they've taken the resources, they then bring them back again to come and assist and sell them to us as well in a higher price. That's what they did. And that's what they are doing as well. And that's why they are teaching us not to indulge, or teaching us not to concentrate in these African herbs that we grew up knowing that they could help us. Each and everyone can testify that he grew up in a home where herbs were being used. Not because there was a healer or a sangoma in your home, but because your parents knew these things. Because your parents were taught from the beginning that these things can help us. Even if when there is lightning, there are also signs and things that are done in an African way to stop all those things. But scientifically, they came with things that to say this can prevent lightning, this can do this. But in an African way, there's always those things that will do as well to prevent those things. It did not start modernly, but it started long time ago, long back ago, in our communities where we stay, in our communities where we live. We had all those things. So we cannot today and say our African way of doing things is bad. If our African way of doing things, we couldn't be where we are today. Because us, we grew up in such communities and such societies. Today we are still living from these African herbs that assisted us to grow. I have never seen a hospital since I grew up. I grew up in an African way. This is who I am. Drinking from the leaves, drinking from the roots of the trees. That's how I grew up. That's how I was nurtured. So I cannot today and say these things did not help us, because that's how I nurture. I don't know anything that could nurture me except the African herbs. Not these African herbs that I would say they are for doing bad things, but only the African herbs that can give life. They can give healing. So all of us, we must think again and see if we cannot go back to our roots, because that's where we grew up. That's that way that you know made you who you are. It is the only way. Thank you. Subscribe, share, subscribe and share. Subscribe, share, and like. Let's continue to strive to teach one another that we are Africans. It will never change. We are black people. It will never change. Regardless how you can color your skin, but your DNA is African. Your DNA is black. Thank you. Enjoy. Thank you so much.